Hello and welcome to Building Design Tools for Future Workflows with Isa of Udin and Optic AI. We'll be discovering the journey of designers turned founders, which I find really interesting, and exploring how they use their automotive experience to create digital tools that's transforming not just their own design workflows and processes, but others as well. I got this recommendation from somebody that's working within Gravity Sketch, Ali Musavi, a very talented automotive designer. And he said, hey, look, you got to check out the guys at Optic AI and what they're doing. So I had to reach out. And as soon as I did, I was so inspired and also empowered by what the guys are doing over there. They're building tools that are solving their own problems within the design workflow. And it's also helping other people. And it's a great example of designers kind of transcending not just design, but also moving into tech as well. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Isa to the stage. Welcome.
Hello.
To 2024. It's so great to have you, Isa. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for the intro. Very kind of you.
No worries. Right. I'm going to let you get into it and I'll pop on at the end of your session for a little bit of Q&A. So over to you, Isa.
Yes, I'll just share my screen. I want to get started here. Okay, so welcome and thank you for joining me on my talk about building tools for future design workflows. Before we get any further, I'll just like to introduce myself. So I'm Esa Mustonen. I'm a car designer by profession. I originally did an internship at Renault and Genesis, and that's how I kind of got into being a car designer. And then I did my thesis for Koenigsegg, and I stayed there for almost 4 years in total, doing mostly exterior car design, some interior. And that's where I met my co-founder, Odilon Loyes, who's a digital sculptor by profession. And he originally did an internship at Kiska. Then he joined me at Koenigsegg. And over that time, we very closely worked with each other and created a nice workflow together. And we kind of wrapped up projects after the 3-4 years, and we both wanted to do our own stuff. And so it was a natural step of let's join forces and try to do something cool together. And we left Koenigsegg and we formed our company called Udin. And Udin is a design studio between me and Odi. And we originally did a lot of design consulting. We still do some design consulting. But over time, we're more and more doing tools for designers, because there's so often stuff that we see are problems in our own workflow, and we want to build a tool for it. And then it so happens a lot of other people also have the same problem, and so then we can share it to the world. And so a few of the examples, kind of the approach to our problem solving, where we do our design projects and we see, okay, there's a problem which looks like it hasn't been solved. So let's just create the product. Let's just create the solution for it. And we first started very small, like this FBX import helper. So bringing alias data to Blender is always kind of frustrating, because you always have to do the same, grouping the objects, removing empties and stuff like this. So we were just like, okay, let's create a script that does everything automatically. So from now on, we never have to do it. And then we gave it for free to people to use also, because it's just a small little script. Same thing we did with the Udin shaders. Compared to Keyshot and stuff like this, they have a very nice preset shader library, but Blender doesn't really have much. And so we created this automotive shader pack that anytime we want to shade and render stuff in Blender, we have all the shaders from the get-go ready to use, and we just have to drag and drop. And again, then we have the product for ourselves, and obviously a lot of people might have the same problem, so then we share it with the world and kind of help ourselves and help the community at the same time. And with the same approach, we came to our current product, which this talk is more focused on, which is Optic. which is our AI kind of generative tool to assist our design workflow with sketches and renderings. So what I want to do with this talk is kind of go through using Optic as an example, how we went from a problem that we had to a solution, and how we solved the problem for ourselves, and then from like getting feedback from others and they want to do it also, to realizing, okay, we can create like a proper product out of it. And I want to kind of walk you through the steps and kind of the process that we went through creating the product. And so the original problem, where this all started, was with 2D development with car design. It's very useful because you can, with just 2D, you can create 3D shapes, just rendering and sketching, and you can iterate super fast. But nowadays, 2D development is actually very time consuming because you spend a lot of time making just fancy renderings. You might spend like 90% of the time making the shader, making the reflections nice, making the cabin look nicer, doing details, and you're wasting all that time not actually developing the design, but just trying to make something that looks realistic and try to like make it flashy and stuff. But so if you could just somehow optimize this, obviously you could go so much faster. And when Stable Diffusion came out, it was obviously interesting for me to be like, okay, can I actually use this to generate cars? Because I see it do artwork and like as you can see some of these examples here, super cool artwork. But can I use it in my own workflow? Can I somehow try to solve the problem with this? And so the first thing I obviously want to do, I open Stable Diffusion and I try to make cars. And the base models are not that good with design or cars. So the results are like, yeah, I mean, it's a car, but I cannot use it really. But that was just the first step. I just want to make it produce cars. And then the next step is, okay, it can make artwork. Now it can make cars for me. I wanted to follow the input that I give. So I have sketches. I might have alias screenshots or Blender screenshots. I wanted to adhere to those shapes because we as designers, we have our own intent and we have our own design inspiration and kind of the thing that we want to develop. And we don't want it to be like a slot machine where you're just generating and hoping to get the right view, getting the right mood of the car. And so you want to be able to give your own sketches, give your own renderings to use as input, so you can control the intent, which is super important. And once I could make cars, I could control the shape. Then I want to specialize it to actually do more specific to what I want, which is car design. And in this case, I trained what you call in Stable Diffusion terms, you call a LoRa, where you can take like 30 to 50 images, and you can create a kind of fine-tuned part of the model. So it can produce, in this case, based on my sketches, you can basically use my sketch style to do the output. And so it learns the style and also some of the form language that I like to use in my sketches. And once I figured out the three with Stable Diffusion, I could actually use it kind of as a workflow where let me throw it in a sketch, let me generate it on it. Okay, it's like kind of like my style, but let me Photoshop a little bit. Let me generate again and basically have a back and forth with the model. And I would share those results that I would get on Instagram. And there would be a lot of curious people obviously asking like, okay, it's super cool, but I also want to do that. How can I set it up? How do I set up Stable Diffusion? And then inevitably you start to get questions like, I'm getting this error message. I don't know how to set up dependencies. I don't know how to I don't know which parameters to use, and it's very technical. So it was like a natural step to be like, okay, looks like I kind of have a process that if I could just give it to someone and play around, they could kind of do the similar stuff, and they could train their own style and so on. So there's a natural step of like, okay, let me wrap this into a nice UI. Let me take care of all the technical aspect, and let the designers just do the fun part, and kind of provide it as a tool for other designers that also want to do it, and they don't have to be technical. And so I started building the UI. And the big problem with UIs nowadays, with stable diffusion UIs specifically, is that you have so many settings that you can tweak. The UIs just end up being a list of all the settings that you can tweak. And so you get this very cluttered, like go through these and find out what works. And this is very non-user friendly. So I wanted to figure out, okay, how many of this stuff is actually necessary for what I'm doing in car design? So how many settings do I actually need to change, and how many I can just automate, or like find the best value? Okay, that's optimized, let me remove it. Or automate a setting where, okay, if this input happens, use this setting. And through that, you could basically remove a lot of the problematic UI and get to something very simple. And so what you see here is the first UI we did. We built it on React, and really important was to start simple. So, for example, just 90% of the screen should just be filled with what you're trying to generate on, because that's the most important thing. And then just the 10% on the side have the most important tools that you need to actually get all the work that you want done. And so we want to make sure that we don't just remove sliders to make it simpler, but have all the tweakings that you need that I would use with all the settings, and hide everything else. And so the designer still has the control, but they have the control, but it's not too overwhelming for the user. And the other super important thing was that when you import the sketch, you can directly press generate, and you don't have to do anything to at least get started. So you don't have to write a prompt. You don't have to tweak the settings. If you just drop in a sketch, press generate, it will already give you some result. And so you instantly can get into the tool and start playing around. Okay, I get the generation, but let me now try to refine it. Let me learn a little bit more. So it doesn't feel overwhelming to start with. And that was the starting point for the UI. And the good thing with starting simple is not only for the user, but it's also good for us, because it gives us an easy platform to start iterating on. Because you don't want to take forever to get the UI, because you want to start to have feedback from the users, also how you like the UI, and then starting the adding the features as you go and iterating on how do I make it better. And the first thing we added was the inspiration tool. And this is, again, the benefit of Stable Diffusion ecosystem. There's a lot of kind of plug and play stuff you can add to it. This inspiration tool, in this case, you can use a secondary image as a inspiration that not only affects the shading, but also affects the kind of form language that the image wants to produce based on the inspiration image. And this is obviously very important for designers that have like mood boards or inspiration that they want to communicate the generations. Then I kind of alluded to this earlier already, but we made the model context aware. So when you bring in an image, the model actually sees what's in the image. So it's like prompting is kind of unnecessary. If you throw in a sketch of a side view of a wagon, of a GTR, or whatever it is, that information is already kind of embedded into the sketch. Like we see the sketch and we know what it is, and the model should be able to do the same. So we made the model context aware. So if you drop in an image, it will automatically look at it and kind of label it for it to generate on correctly. And finally, a really important feature, which like when I was practicing just getting a stable diffusion workflow, I want to train my own style. I might also want to train my own like design language or like object, let's say the group C in this case. And so we wanted to create an easy way for the users to train any added like information to the model, whether it's their own style or the form language. And this gives them a little private thing to just improve the model for themselves. And all of these features that you see here is stuff that like I wish I had to make my work easier, like being able to automatically just train lenses like a fine-tuned part of the model. I really need it because I don't want to label the data sets. I don't want to do any data prep, which is traditionally you need to do every time you do LoRa and stable diffusion, for example. So all of these are just kind of improvements where I, as a designer, don't want to do all the technical part. Let me just automate it for the tool and make it easier for me, and that way also for the user. And so just give you some context of how the app works nowadays. I'll just drop in a sketch here in the tool. I've just first do a pass where I don't do any other input. I'll just press generate and get the kind of shaded version of what I inputted, and I just refined it here so we can see it in like 4K resolution. So you get a lot of detail, and like as you saw, I didn't have to change any settings to get started. But now I'm like, okay, I get the basic result. Let me see where I could take it further. And so I drop in the inspiration image and start playing around, little tweaking around with the settings and try to make it more, in this case, kind of, how would I say, this flat plane side and this red color that the inspiration image has to bring to the output. And kind of with this back and forth, I'll show you example case here. This is directly from Optic, so there's no photoshopping other than me just placing the images so they fit into the aspect ratio. And so you can throw in an image and you can quickly render it, and you can play around with the features or you can just shade it like I did in this case. And what you saw here is mostly car design and car exterior, because that's what we are. But in the future, as we nail car design, we want to go further from just exterior design, but also car interior, product design in general, also even fashion. So we want to be able to bring in the help that we see with car design to all other product design areas as well. That being said, the images that you see here are actually generated with the current model that we use for Optic. So we haven't optimized it for it yet, but it already starts to get some design sense from the training we do. And so now that you kind of see how we kind of ended up where Optic is today, I want to show you kind of a glimpse of what's coming next and actually showing you it in a proper workflow where I start with a rough sketch. I'll build a rough model and I render some of the views that you actually kind of see here already. And so I'll be using Gravity Sketch just to do an initial sketch. And then I'll drop it into Blender and you'll see the new features that's coming to Optic soon, which is the Blender plugin, where you can actually generate directly with Optic in Blender. And so you see some of that in this workflow. At the beginning, I always just like to start with actually in Gravity Sketch. I actually just sit on the floor and I sketch the car around me because that's like super easy to get the package. Like how much space do I need? How much space do I need to rotate the wheel? How wide are my arms? Do I have enough headroom? And so I just like to do rough packages with Gravity Sketch like that. I also kind of sketch the exterior. I'm not too concerned with the design features yet because I just want the proportions and kind of the exterior shell to match the proportions that I created and I need for the package. And once I have the package, I export it and bring it to Blender. And I just start creating like a shell, kind of enclosing the volume that I created with the sketch in the gravity sketch. So I have something that I can start iterating on and start playing around with. So I'm not too critical at this point yet. I just want to close the volume. I won't be trying to fix the design features. I just need a closed volume that I can start playing around and having some fun. And once I have this closed volume, I just quickly throw some shaders on it, give a ground plane so it actually sits on something. And I can with a very rough model, I can just start creating a view. And this is the Optic plugin for Blender. I can create the view directly in Blender, and I can start generating on that view with Optic. And so I can either kind of try to refine, try to render it a bit cleaner, or I can even try to make it suggest some themes by reducing the influence that the shape needs to be. So here you can see some of the freedom I'm playing around with the opacity a little bit. I'll try another pass just to see what the model would give. But in this way, you can kind of create this working or design environment where you just have these views floating around. You can go back to those views, kind of check, do I like this view? Let me do another generation on it. What you can also do is, because it's Blender, you can actually utilize the brushing tools that Blender directly has. And we did that with the plugin. So when you get the generation, you can actually just brush on top of it directly. So you don't even have to take it out from Blender if you don't want to. And with the changes that you do on the generations, then you can obviously use that to generate again. So you can basically iterate directly on Blender. And what you see here is I just created like this brush stroke. I just brushed a very blocky thing on the side because I'm like, side is missing a little bit of volume. Let me try something with the generation. And I go, actually, I like that. So as you see here, I start to model it, and I actually much prefer it. So I actually keep the change. And this is the kind of workflow I like to do with the plugin, where in 2D, it's super easy to quickly test around stuff. And then I go, okay, actually, I like that. Let me try that in the geometry. And then, okay, it works in the geometry. Let's move forward. Yeah, here, just iterating a little bit. I finally smoothened the model, so it doesn't look so polygonal. Here also in the front, you can see I actually increased the volume of the front because I see it in Optic. Actually, it looks quite cool. So let me try to build it in 3D. And I'm just creating a rough model, because once we start doing renderings, we can actually use Optic to fill in a lot of the details. So we can have a proportional model, and then we actually render the final car with Optic. And I'll show you here. We don't have an environment of the car at all. So it's just in the kind of the studio. But for example, if you use inspiration images, we can actually generate environment for the car. I think I'll do another pass here because there's shadow. I want the lower part to get shadow. Just make sure that it's dark at the lower end. I'll generate again, and I can actually start to have a process where I actually directly generate the environment for the car. And with this method, I actually did these final renderings where on the top right corner, you actually see the screenshot or the viewpoint that I had in Blender. And then I would just do Optic rendering, and it would be like 85, 90% there, but there's some stuff that I would have to fix. So then I would brush on top of it, do a few selections, bring it back to Optic, do another pass, and reduce the influence. So it doesn't have so much freedom to go away from what I want, and kind of refine with another pass. And once I'm happy, okay, it looks nice, I'll just upscale it, take it 4K, and I have this final rendering kind of with the environment already. And as you can see in the Blender, it's just a wet studio. I did the same with the rear view. So again, just the view in Blender, render it in Optic. Okay, there's some features that are not really matching my expectations, then we fix those a little bit, and having a rendering basically of the 3D super quick, and the 3D can be super rough. And both of these, I did a little bit post, but you can do them in like half an hour just from the Optic rendering. So you see kind of the little teaser of the workflow, not just in Optic, but also how you can use it in Blender. And it's also a little announcement that the Optic Blender plugin is coming soon. So be on the lookout for that if you want to try. And just finally, I want to kind of discuss even further in the future, like what we'll see big improvements on, kind of in general, but also what we're looking at in Optic. And one thing is the inference time reducing, which is just the time it takes to generate the image. And there's already some apps that can do it, but the inference time will basically end up to real time, where let's say you do a brush stroke, it automatically updates that, and that will kind of transform the way we can interact with the tools, because we don't have to wait the 5 to 8 seconds to get the generation. Another big aspect, which I think in the future we'll see a lot more, is 3D generation. Like right now, we are generating through 2D always, generating pixels, but ultimately we want the 3-dimensional data. And as these models improve, I think we'll see much more 3D generation and AI tools specific to 3D generation. So it's an interesting aspect to look forward to as well. And finally, I think we'll see better interaction with the model. One example was that when you brush stroke, that you instantly see the update, but you can even have like automatic selections and stuff like this, that the AI just sees what you're trying to select. So I think we'll have much more intuitive use case, whereas right now the UIs are very much like, here's a classic slider, it will change the value in the AI model. So I think the interaction will improve a lot over the coming years. Yeah, and thank you for listening. And if you guys want to check out what we do, or if you want to check out Optic or send us a message or anything, you can just go to Udin B.V, udinbv.com, and you can find us there, or even DM me on Instagram. Everything works for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Isa. Really amazing and truly inspiring as well, actually. I think it's quite empowering to see somebody who's coming from a design perspective, as I said before, actually just building a tool to solve their problem, but it's also solving other people's problems. And I wanted to ask, like, what gave you that confidence to do that? You know, like that is to kind of transcend that world. I wanted to ask, what gave you the confidence to do that?
I think in general, I've always been kind of that kind of person where if I just see that something doesn't work, or like I want to figure it out, I just open like the most simplest example, like, okay, how can I make the little thing work? And then I see, okay, I can make this little thing. How can I add a little bit to it? And I always like to tinker and learn how to build more stuff. And yeah, I think it's just kind of in my personality.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, especially as throughout this festival, we're talking about digital craftsmanship. We're talking about this building of the virtual studio, and historically with the physical studio, you see people like warping and combining tools to define their craft. It's ultimately what makes people's craft, right? And Danny in the chat, like coined this term, tool hacking, I think it was, and it's interesting to see that, or ask that question: are we starting to see that with digital tools too, like this kind of idea of tool hacking? Do you think we are?
Well, actually, I think in general, I think we're starting to design more and more on the digital. Like we often think of, like, if you're doing a program or stuff like this, it's not really designing, you're just programming and stuff like this. But the more and more we do virtual stuff, we're actually designing that stuff too. So I think that's also why I like it a lot, because while it's not a car and it's not a physical object, there's a lot of interesting thing that goes into designing the thing. Like, how do I make the UI intuitive? How do I not make it not complicated, but not remove the stuff that the user needs? So it's like the requirements that you need to build a car are not the same, but you still need the same kind of thinking to find the solutions. And I think that's also what I like in general in design.
In a moment, I'm going to introduce Michael Tanzilo from yesterday's community-driven design panel. But before I do that, like a good segue into Michael coming on stage is actually how did the community help you build this tool? Like, how did it feels like a community-driven design in a sense.
Yeah.
You know? And with that, we'll just intro Michael to the stage, if that's all right. Michael, thanks so much for joining. I think it's a relevant time since I asked that question. But yeah, it's great.
You say community, I just show up. It's just
yeah. But yeah, Isa, why don't you give your thoughts, and then Michael, I would love to hear your thoughts on the session as well after that.
So I think it's already started with the Instagram and getting like feedback from like what people like and what people don't like. But I think obviously once we had the UI and we had the first people, they were like our fellow designers. And so they actually have a lot of point of views that you don't actually think about. And you also hear, because they work in an OEM environment where they go, well, it's nice, but for the work we do in a studio, I need it to be more realistic, or I need it to be more sketch style. So then you go, okay, maybe we can adjust the model a little bit based on that. And there's so many times that, which I'm super glad about, that like a friend of mine that is using the tool discovers a bug or there's something going on with the thing, and they instantly hit me up with a DM and go, you have to check this out, there's something going on. I'm like, I'm so happy, because I obviously cannot use the tool all the time to find everything. And so I'm like, so happy that someone could find it for me.
Fantastic. Michael, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I agree with Dan that your ability to see a problem and just approach it with the idea that you can solve it is not to be overlooked. Like you talked about, because it came up a couple times in your discussion, like just talking about starting your own agency where you were doing consulting and design work on like that takes some of that same mentality of just like, yeah, no, I'm just going to do it on my own. It's all good. Like I got this. So I do. One of the questions that came up in the chat that I thought was very, very telling was that, I mean, obviously you come from an automotive background. This is a very automotive centric design. We have a lot of footwear designers and other designers that are probably listening in. Do you see that this workflow would be applicable outside of automotive design in other design mediums?
Yeah, I think so. At least as far as I know, the way the design workflow is there. Obviously, like with cars, it's going more and more Blender. But I know with like footwear, there's still the classic, just the Photoshop. And if you could have just the kind of AI pal next to you, help you design the stuff, I think it's as applicable as with cars. And the same way, again, with cars, we use inspiration images and mood board and stuff like this. I think with fashion and footwear and stuff like this, it's still the same case. So again, once we have car design, we also, like, once we have car design nailed down, we want to go really deep into all the other aspects so we can nail them as well. But at least based on my understanding right now, I think there's nothing stopping us from doing the same with footwear and stuff.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. The other thing that I was thinking during this presentation, because I've been kind of banging the table for this for a while, and to see you doing this is so good, because everyone was introduced to generative AI as this text to final image kind of solution thing, and it caused all these problems, and it was like that was never the way it was going to be. So seeing that it's a part of, like, it's a boost to your workflow and it's a boost to your productivity. I guess there's two questions in there. One is how do you see it continuing on? Is that kind of what you see? And two, I'm also curious as to like how much time this process has actually saved you over the previous way that you're working. Like like, I don't know if you've been able to quantify it or put it into terms like you're able to work twice as fast or whatever like that. So sorry, that was kind of Dan's better at asking questions than I am. That was kind of a two-parter.
I mean, the second question at least, regular Photoshop sketches, I might be slow, but some of them that I would do at like when I did the internship at Renault might take 6 hours or something to finish. And most of it, like I said in the presentation, most of it is just make the cabin realistic and make the wheels realistic, make the environment realistic. And with Optic, I can just do it within an hour. Like if I have an input sketch, I don't have to think about the background. Let me just throw in inspiration, generate it, do a few passes. So I usually like to take the generation, just take 5 to 10 minutes in Photoshop, fix the things that I see are obviously wrong, throw it back, reduce the influence so it's not allowed to change so much. And then usually after 1 or 2 passes, I go, okay, bam, refine it, upscale it, bam, ready to go. So I would assume I could go from like the 6-hour sketches to hopefully just 1 hour with the current workflow.
That's
what
insane. That's an insane, like, 80% improvement or whatever. I don't know numbers, but that's incredible. And then in terms of the other question of like, where do you see this is kind of like how AI is going to be worked into people's workflows, just kind of this like companion along with their creative designs, or how do you see it developing going forward?
I would say the same way like with ChatGPT, where you can produce a lot of text, but if you just let it produce text, it's very useless. Like you still need to have your intention and something new that you're trying to bring into the equation. And in that sense, I think for quite a while, I don't see a point where the AI will do everything, because you will always have the stuff that you want to introduce and then basically the new input that you want to introduce to the model. And that way you come up with the new ideas. And these like stable diffusion stuff like this are not very good at, how do you say, generalizing and putting two concepts together. So that's where I think humans will hopefully like forever be the top dogs, but we'll see how that plays out. But I think for quite a while humans will be the driving force, and the AI is just doing the like processing tasks basically.
Yeah.
I think, Michael, you raised a really interesting point on one of your first questions about asking about whether it's applicable to other industries. And, I know Ruben Arnold, he's a footwear designer, so kind of pointed that question towards him and whether it would be applicable to footwear. And I guess the question that leads on from that is, how do you feel like your experience as an automotive designer gave you that like advantage or like that unique positioning to actually create a tool like this? Like what advantage has that given you through the process?
I mean, one super important thing is just how to say, being super picky about what's acceptable for the model and whatnot. Because again, if you think of like Midjourney, it can produce car designs and like very beautiful looking images, but those designs are not very useful because they are very naive from a design perspective. So then you have to kind of train it and align the model to a high enough standard where hopefully actually designers can use it. And that's where it's so useful to be a designer trying to solve the problem, because if it's not acceptable for you, it's most likely not acceptable for anyone that wants to use the tool. So I think that has been a very big one. And like I again said before, while I'm not designing cars, when I'm doing the UI and putting together the product, a lot of the same thinking and how do you weigh simplicity and complexity and a lot of the stuff that you would balance anyways when you're designing cars, the design thinking carries over to actually building products. So I think that's also a very big aspect that has helped me out.
What advice would you give to somebody interested in developing their own tools?
I would say just the biggest hurdle is not trying or thinking it will be too complicated, but just start simple. Like, can I make this little thing work? Like, you obviously don't want to start just like, okay, I will climb this hill, but just take the first step and can I make this little small step? Okay, I made this small step. Can I make the next small step? And if you think of it like too large of a mountain, you will never try to do it. And so I just like to always solve the next little problem and build on every step that I take.
That's very cool, right? I have to ask this question because it's come up a few times here. Availability of, I think, both. So Blender plugin is coming soon, right? Give us a timeline on that.
Within a month, we'll try to push it out. So we're just finalizing at the moment and trying to make sure there's no bugs. And so it should be coming out hopefully within a month.
And in terms of openness, free, paid subscription, what's the deal?
We always, because we pay for the GPU cost for the generation, so it will be part of the subscription. So when you subscribe to Optic, you will get the plugin as well. If we didn't have to pay for the GPU, and if there was an easy way to just talk to the GPU of the user, we could just give it for free. But since it's not, it's still within the subscription.
Cool. And then, Optic then. Same question, I think. Is it one package or are they independent?
Everything is just, if you get Optic, you get the web UI, and through the web UI you can download the plugin for Blender. And right now it's still in early access, but we are actually soon coming out of it. So then hopefully we're introducing like free trials that you can do, because right now you just kind of have to jump in. So we're trying to make it easier for people to try it out before they commit or anything.
Yeah, on that trying out point then, is there kind of a free trial or something that people can test out?
Soon. So we're coming out of early access. You can already subscribe to it. We don't have a free trial, but we're coming out of it soon, and we'll do free trials so people can try. And just to point out, we also on our Discord, we like to do like 3 days sometimes where we open the tool for anyone to use for a day. And people can use it as much as they want.
Nice one. Well, before I close it out, Michael, do you have any other further thoughts?
No, I think it's incredible, and I think somebody said inject this into my veins in the comments or something along that. I think that's a good sentiment. I mean, I love your approach, because whenever I remember the first time I started working in software, and we were getting bug reports, and I talked to somebody who'd done it for a long time, and they were like, and I was like, man, it stinks that we have these bugs, and they're like, no, it's a great thing, and I was like, why? It's like, because people are using it. Like, if the best message you can get as a developer is like, we need to finish, like, we've got this thing by the end of the week. We've hit this bug. It's like, no, it's integral to their process. So it's really cool to hear that you've got that approach. It's cool. So I'm going to be, you'll expect me, I'm going to be bugging you. So it's been really, because I think that what you're doing is incredible, and I want more people to find out about it. So congratulations on everything that you built.
Guys, thanks again. Isa, great session. And Odie, who's the other co-founder, not in this session, kudos to you too. Amazing job. And Michael, thanks so much for joining us and giving your insight on it too as well.